The problem is that I'm trying to overcome resistance, but the president's actions in a mandate hardens the resistance.
This is not something that the government should mandate, and somebody shouldn't have to make the choice between keeping their job and getting a jab in the arm.
Republican leaders up in arms as the Labor Department is set to enforce President Biden's sweeping vaccine mandate. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp tweeting this. This action by President Biden is blatantly unlawful, and Georgia will not stand for it. Let's bring in the former Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia on this. Sir, right before the president decided to mandate the vaccine for the military and now federal workers and now even private businesses, this is what we knew in terms of his thinking. Watch.
You don't want to mandate and try and force anyone to take a vaccine. We've never done that.
No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand it be mandatory.
There will be no federal vaccinations database and no federal mandate requiring everyone to obtain a single vaccination credential.
So they've changed their mind and they're going to use the Labor Department in order to try to enforce this. What do you think?
Well, good morning. And I want to actually begin by thanking both of you for your coverage Saturday of 9/11. I lost a friend on September 11th, Barbara Olson, who was a dynamic, heroic person. And I caught some of your show Saturday. I appreciated your remembering all the Americans we lost that day. Yeah, this is obviously a very big step by the president, reflects a change of direction. The COVID cases have not progressed in the direction that he wanted. The Labor Department does have the authority to adopt so-called emergency temporary standards to address what's called a grave risk in the workplace and where that standard is necessary. That's not what we heard from the president on Thursday. What makes this unusual in part is the president was saying, I have a broad public health initiative that I want to put in place here to get all Americans that are eligible vaccinated. And I'm going to use OSHA to achieve that public health initiative. OSHA is part of the Labor Department. If that is the way that the Labor Department itself goes forward, then I think this action is going to be legally vulnerable. The president did not say there's a grave danger in the workplace, and this rule is necessary to address it. That's what OSHA will need to establish when it puts out its rule in the weeks ahead.
Very interesting. Yeah, that $14,000 fine, we talked about it last hour, per individual if the vaccination mandate is not enforced. But how do you define grave risk?
Right.
If you don't use that word or that phrase, how would you define that before?
Right. Is there an example from where they used it before?
Well, that's what's interesting as well, is that it's a special authority that's being used here by the Labor Department. Ordinarily, new rules by the government have to go through public comment. The public has a chance to see the proposal, to make suggestions, to improve it. It's a process that I used as secretary and that I use in the private sector. But they are seeking to bypass there. I would urge them actually to allow comment, to take public comment, because there's so many questions now about the rule. In terms of using this emergency process with no comment, it has been used. It was used for benzene. It was used for asbestos. And I believe in both of those cases, they were not able to sustain the rule. So these emergency standards in the past, when they've been adopted by the Labor Department, have proved to be very vulnerable in the courts, which I think is part of the reason you're hearing the criticisms now. Obviously, workers, businesses have a lot of questions about how this is going to be implemented, what the exact requirements are going to be. And it would be better if the Labor Department would give people a chance to provide feedback, input, and then they may have a better chance of having this rule withstand legal scrutiny.
How would OSHA even how would you enforce this? I mean, is every business over 100 employees? I'm just trying to think of the manpower it would require to try to enforce it.
It will be a challenge for OSHA to enforce it. Obviously, they can pick their shots. They don't always need to seek that maximum fine. They more often not, they don't seek it. And I should be clear, it's not a fine that the individual must pay. It's a fine for the company. But it would be a very large undertaking by OSHA. This is probably the largest, most controversial rule that OSHA and maybe the entire Labor Department will ever adopt. And I think they're well advised to be careful in the processes that they follow. And it is a strange situation to have the president, as he did Thursday, saying, I'm very frustrated with 80 million Americans for not getting vaccinated. And so I'm going to get their employer on their back, and I'm going to get OSHA on their back. That's not how you ordinarily launch a public health initiative. I do want to say there are many, many Americans who still ought to get vaccinated. This vaccine program is one of the great achievements of the last administration. I urge folks who are not vaccinated, who can safely do so, to get out there and do so. But there's and OSHA does have a role in keeping workers safe in the workplace, including from COVID. But this is a challenging legal path the president has chosen.
Well, the two of us are, and I think we'd both agree that it's given us some freedom.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Nice to see you,
Thank you.
Eugene Scalia.
And thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.